Good evening, Terry.
I own a motel not too far from you, and you'd be welcome to spend the night in one of the empty rooms if you'd like.
It burns! Oh, it burns! And I'm the devil.
Hey everybody, this is Brian, and I'm camped out here under a blanket of stars in an undisclosed location looking for Sasquatch. No, I'm just kidding. But what I'm excited to bring you this evening is a discussion more like, with the great Bob Gimlin. Well, who's Bob Gimlin? Well, you might know him from the Patterson and Gimlin film, that American short motion picture. People say it's the only real concrete footage of Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Well, I talked to 86-year-old Bob Gimlin about the footage, the day they went out, the whole expedition going out there and looking for what has been referred to now as Patty the Bigfoot. And we went further than that. Bob shared a wealth of information about his life before and after, his days of ranching, his relationship with Roger Patterson, and the backlash that he had for over 30 years because of claiming that, they went out and filmed Bigfoot. So it's a really interesting conversation. Real great guy. So sit back, camp out with me as we listen to Bob Gimlin here on the Necronomicast. Calling in on our hotline from Yakima County, Washington, the man, the legend, the great Bob Gimlin. Bob, how are you today?
Well, I'm fine, thank you for calling, and I don't know about that great part, Brian, but by golly, I'll accept whatever compliments that I can get, you see.
That's awesome. Bob, I have to say, I'm 43 years old, and I remember seeing your famous Patterson Gimlin film as a child, and it's entertained me, it's fascinated me, it's scared me for all these years. And to have you on our program and to be able to talk to you today, it's a real honor and a treat, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure glad you had the opportunity to see that when you were a little boy. And, I've talked to some people in the past that had the same chances to see it, and it changed their life somewhat.
Well, Bob, now that I got you on the phone, for our listeners that aren't totally familiar with the story, the background of your encounter with Roger Patterson, I was wondering if you can kind of take us back to 1967, to October of 1967, and kind of give us a little bit of a background to your expedition, your search, your journey into Bluff Creek.
Yeah, I certainly can, Brian. Brian, do you want me to start about time Roger came to my place and informed me that they had found tracks around a piece of equipment right after Labor Day weekend in 1967, and they asked Roger if he was interested in coming down. Well, he'd come and talk to me about it, and I told him, well, yeah, I can take you down there, Roger, but I'm going to have to. I had a steady job, but it was a hot roofing job in this area, and when the winter months or fall months start closing down a little bit with your work, so I knew that I was going to be laid off because I was the last man hired. So anyway, I told Roger that I had a 1-ton Chevrolet truck with a horse van built on the back for me to transport my horses from one area to the other, to the mountains, when I rode a lot in the mountains in those days. And so I said, well, Roger, I'll get everything together. And I had a little place, and I had some cattle and horses, and my wife worked, and I didn't have children. And so I knew that I was going to have to get somebody to take care of the animals, the critters, before I got going. So about the last part of September, I finally told Roger, well, we can head on down that way. So he got the horses here. Most of the horses I had at that time were either pack horses or horses that I shouldn't say this, but horses mainly that I could ride that the average guy wouldn't be able to ride. People call them green broke. I call them not trained real well. I didn't have time to finish them up so that the average guy could get on them and ride them. And so that was kind of what the story was there, Brian, and got everything together, and we went down there. So we ended up down there at the Bluff Creek area, an area where Roger told me to go because I'd never been down there before, and he had. And he kind of knew from the Slick expedition and the other ones that had been mounted down there that the area to go into would be the best chances of seeing one. Well, my concern was that I wanted to see the tracks too. I had no idea I'd ever actually see a Sasquatch. I'd never seen a track out in the wild. So when we got down and drove back in the woods from the city of Willow Creek, we went back in there about 32, 35 miles, somewhere back in at a place called Bluff Creek. And just up about 3 miles from Bluff Creek on top of the hill on a place called Onion Mountain was this piece of equipment that they had in there. Well, it wasn't equipment. What it was a refueling tank. And they put it in there. The story was they put it in there on a Friday afternoon after Labor Day weekend. And when they come back on Tuesday morning, there's 3 different sizes of large footprints around it. They weren't all real large. There was, it appeared to be a male, a female, and a juvenile. But by the time we got down there had been so many people already talked about it and told about it in the town of Willow Creek. There was human tracks all around it, and they were disturbed a lot. And because it had rained down there a lot, and there rained hard, and so with the heavy rain and the human tracks disturbing it, there wasn't hardly any good Sasquatch tracks that you could cast or anything, parts of tracks and so forth. So we made camp and decided that we'd ride and see what we could find, and so altogether we just rode many miles every day. Made big circles through the woods and back to camp at night. And we usually rode from right at daylight in the morning until just about getting dark at night. So, and down there, see, the days are fairly short, and last of September, 1st of October. So the time we got down there, it was it was either the very last day of September, the 1st of October. I wasn't keeping track on a calendar or anything. So so we'll just call it 1st of October. And Roger and I had rode miles every day around and then come back to camp. And then on a Saturday on October 20th, 1967, we decided to go a lot further back, about 35 miles further back than we had gone in the area in the big circles. So we took a little pack horse, loaded him down with what equipment we needed, and started out shortly after lunch. And beautiful sunshiny day, and 20th day of October, and I was kind of celebrating my birthday because my birthday was the 18th of October. And that was my 36th birthday. So we were just enjoying the sunshine and the beautiful colors, fall colors of the leaves and the maple leaves and the trees. And Roger was riding in front of me and taking pictures of me leading the pack horse. And so we were just enjoying the day and having a good time, and not really thinking about anything but just how pretty, how beautiful it was for October 20th, and sunshine, and of course warm and just good. And we were riding up Bluff Creek, up the edge of Bluff Creek, and we got up there about 3 miles from where we camped, and went around the big downfall root system of a tree that was by the creek, and one was standing across the creek, about 60 feet from us. Roger was in front of me, approximately 12, 15 feet, and his horse just started acting up really bad. Roger trying to get off, and of course it saw the Sasquatch on the other side of the creek, and I saw it also, but I stayed on my horse, and I just let go of the pack horse and let it run back towards where we camped. And so I was able to stay on the big roping horse that I was riding and handling pretty good, because I was young enough then that I could do pretty good with a horse. And so Roger got off his finally and jerked the camera out of the saddlebag on the left-hand side and ran across the creek, and with the camera up to his eye, and the bank on the other side just went up slightly, about 3 feet or so, 3 or 4 feet. Roger had the camera to his eye, so he stumbled and fell down. His toes went into the soil, the sandy type soil there, and he fell down on his elbows. Well, he got up and went over to a little downfall tree that was about half covered up with soil, and stabilized himself on that, and started getting the good, decent film footage that you see if you've ever seen that film footage. And then he hollered at me and said, "I've got to relocate, Bob." And so he said, "Cover me." Well, we both had rifles in our saddle bag, in our scabbard bags on the saddle. And so I rode across the creek with my horse and stepped down off the horse while Roger was relocating. And Roger just got to where he was going to film again, and I'll call it a she, because at that time I had no idea whether it was a male or female, because I didn't know that, I just thought the mammary glands was just a big chest, I guess. I wasn't even thinking. You don't have time really to think that much about what's going on. I just thought to myself, well, yes, they really do exist, and here is one walking away from us. So I never raised the rifle up, ever. And in that 352 film frame, I think it is, she turned her head as she's walking, never turned the body, just turned the head, and looked at me when I stepped down off the horse. Well, of course, Roger was able to get that on the film, on the footage. And if you ever watch that, you'll see at one time, it turns his head just a little bit to the right at the angle that I was at to look at me, and I suppose to wonder, what I was doing or whatever when I got stepped down off the horse. So then it walked on and disappeared up a little canyon, a little draw, and I wanted to get back on the horse and follow it. And Roger hollered up and said, "No, I ran out of film, Bob. I want to catch up my horse, put more film in the camera, then we'll go where it disappeared up that canyon." So that's kind of how it all went. And then we went back, caught Roger's horse up, caught the pack horse up and tied him up. Roger got more film out of his camera, and he got underneath the poncho and put new film in the camera. And so then this was a little bit of time, of course. And then we followed where we last seen it, going up the little draw. And up about, probably we went a quarter of a mile, and we saw half of a wet footprint on a big flat rock. And it indicated it went right up through the cliffs and up into the timber again on the side of the mountain. Well, I wanted to go on up through there and follow it more, but I didn't have a camera. And Roger said, "No, we got to get back down there and get taken some pictures of the prints and do some research things on it," which we did. I got up on a stump with a cowboy heel on, a riding heel on a boot, if anybody knows what that is, or I think a lot of people do. It's not a flat heel like a walking shoe. It's a pretty sharp heel. Anyway, at that particular time, I weighed about 185 pounds. I got up on this stump, jumped off, and landed with my right foot as close to the tracks as I could. And, of course, Roger took pictures of that, and then he took pictures of the track line itself. And then the horse I was riding was a 16-hand type roping horse, weighed about 1,200 pounds. And with me on him and saddle and everything, it was a little over 1,400 pounds. And so the horse had shoes on, and the horse would not make as deep a track by 1 foot down at a time as the Sasquatch tracks were. So that indicated right there that it was extremely heavy. And, of course, it was big, really big. And so that's kind of what the whole thing went at there. And then Roger didn't know, why running around like he was doing and everything, how much good footage that he did get. So he wanted to get it to Yakima, to his brother-in-law up here, a man named Al Diatley, and get it processed to see if there was any real footage on there. Well, that's what the footage was that everybody sees, worldwide famous footage. So, Brian, that I don't know, and I'll let you ask me some questions now because I may not have covered everything that you need to hear, you see, and we want to get everything as pretty straight as we can.
Well, I appreciate that, Bob. I'm kind of a Bigfoot nut, and I have, like I told you, since I was a little boy, and I watched television shows like In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, and I saw footage that you and Roger shot that day. So I wanted to make sure that I was listening to you and just taking in the words from somebody that is famous for that incredible footage. I have to ask. Now, like, we hear these reports now, and people have been compiling reports, and now there's not so much of a stigma reporting encounters and sightings and things. It was a lot different 50 years ago, and we learned, like, the Mount St. Helens region, the Sasquatch there, they've got kind of a reputation for maybe some violence or aggression. I was just wondering, during the encounter, did you feel any kind of concern for you and Roger or your horse? I mean, for their safety. I know Roger said, "Cover me," because here you are seeing this creature. I mean, did you ever feel, or did it happen too fast? Did you have some?
Well, okay,
fear?
Brian. Can I elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have fear of a lot of things because I grew up in the woods and had just about as many encounters with creatures out there as the average person has that goes out a lot. And I never felt any threat as long as it was walking away from us and not running. It was just walking. And apparently Roger did feel a little bit of threat because he didn't want me to leave him there, he said, alone, because he didn't know, or I didn't know either, never even give it any thought. Roger thought maybe that the other two, if there was two more, that was up in the trees there that might not be happy with that one leaving her. He didn't really tell me all the things that he was kind of apprehensive about, but he didn't want me to leave because he had first thing he wanted to do is get more film and a camera. Second thing, I guess it was, that he didn't want to be there alone. And he expressed that pretty clearly, that he didn't want to be left there. So, and things were happening dramatically fast. So I never had time to even think about fear. And we were very fatigued from being down there. That was almost 3 weeks of steady riding every day. And I was used to riding a lot of miles and a lot of hours. But, the tension of extremely just looking constantly for some evidence is not like just riding, just riding for pleasure. We were riding to try to find something. So it was searching, basically, is what we were riding at. And so it has a little bit of a more fatigue on you than just leisurely riding out and enjoying everything, like we were doing that afternoon, that early afternoon. It was because we had ridden that same area before coming in from making our circles around. We'd ridden in that same area. And, there was nothing there. We didn't even think about anything being there, really, because we'd been past that numerous of times back and forth, and we weren't that far from camp, really. But, that fear thing, sometimes I kind of hesitate to say that, but I grew up when my dad told me the only... you're better off in the dark because you have the same advantage as everybody else does, and human beings are probably what you must fear most. And I thought, well, yeah, I watch human beings very closely. I'm not afraid of bear, cougar, or whatever's out there because I've had encounters with all of them.
Now you're back there in Yakima County, Washington. I mean, that's where you live.
Yes.
Have you had any other sightings or any kind of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, maybe not encounters, but tracks, anything else happen with you in that area?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yes, I have. Okay, in 1978, I had been busted up pretty bad on horses in the mountains on 72, and I wasn't healing. My shoulders and stuff weren't healing really good. So I went and had surgery and had my shoulder replaced and the arm fixed. And so I took a leave of absence from my job. I was trucking at that time, and had my father-in-law haul me down into California right at the Mexican border. And I started riding back that summer of 78. And when I got up into the Marble Mountains in Oregon, one night I had a mule and a saddle horse and a pack mule. And I was just in one of those nights where it was a cloudy night, but the full moon. And I pulled up, I rode up into a place that had about a 10-acre meadow with part end of it was kind of swampy. So I thought, well, I never put my tent up most of the time. I just slept out in the open. But that night, the mosquitoes were so bad there that I went ahead and put my little tent up. And I wasn't asleep. I was reading with my flashlight. I was reading in the book for my trail the next day. And the mule and the horses was out in the meadows there about 300 yards away. And something bumped me in the ribs. And I look up, and about that time, the clouds went on past the moon, and I could see this human-type thing standing right above my tent. And, of course, my instinct was to get my boots on and get outside and see what was going on. Well, by the time I got outside, it was gone. But and then the cloud come over, and there was no more bright moon there for a little bit, for 3 or 4 minutes. And so I thought, well, maybe. But I was running underneath a big ponderosa pine, and the creek was about 15 feet away from me, traveling rapidly down the side of the hill. And so there was no way of even seeing a track there because I disturbed everything, putting up my tent and moving around there. And it's pretty hard to get any evidence in pine needles where there's a really blanket of pine needles around. Okay, that was one thing that I assumed had to be a Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
And then up here in our Bumping Lake area, where it's been real active area, in fact, a guy just called me that I hadn't talked to just before you called and told me that he'd been up there and they'd seen a lot of evidence up there. Well, three of us were sitting around the campfire one night. This was in April. And we had a big campfire there. And the closest guy was sitting, there was a road right next to us, about 15 feet from where we were sitting. There's a road there. And he was sitting closest to the road, this guy and his dog. And then another fellow was sitting another 4 or 5 feet from him. And then I was about 4 or 5 feet with my feet up by the fire on further down. Well, something went through the trees quite a little ways on the other side of the road, which would have been approximately from where we were sitting, about 65 feet. And it got right even, or we heard it walking in the trees, but we just thought it was human up there, because there's up around that Bumping Lake at that time of the year, the people start coming in there to boat around and do different things. And so we didn't give it much thought until it got right even with us, and it let out one of those terrible roars that just lifts you up. So we knew that a human couldn't make that kind of a roar. And so the guy that was closest to it jumped up and he said, "I'm getting the heck out of here." He took his dog and jumped in his rig and started it up. And then I guess he decided he didn't want to leave there because his tent was there and everything was there. So the next guy was a retired Army colonel, and he ran in to get his recording piece of equipment. And then I got up and thought, well, I'll yell back at it and see what happens. Well, with my little yell, it probably snickered a little bit and said, "Oh, God." And then it let out another holler at about 100 yards away. And this all happened that fast. From the time we did all this, it had already traveled about, it was approximate. We never measured or anything like that because we didn't know really where it was standing when it hollered back. And so that was another deal that I knew I was close to one, but never saw it.
Do you have, in your part of the country, do you have personally much communication or interaction with Native American communities there in Washington? Because they seem to have Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say they have a real connection, it seems like, with Sasquatch. In fact, sometimes they call them brother tribe.
They do, indeed. All right. Okay, yes. Friday afternoons, twice a month, I speak on the tribal radio in a place called Toppenish, Washington. And my friends that are tribal members come down and talk, and 2 or 3 of my tribal members have constant contact with them, and they see them regularly up there on the tribal land, up close to a place called Mount Adams, which is on the reservation on the tribal land. And that is just adjacent to where I live. I don't live in the timber part of it, but I live in the sagebrush. I live a mile and a half from the sagebrush hills as tribal land, and I ride up there on the horses frequently. But yes, in fact, last Friday when we talked on the radio down there, they were talking about a couple of them a couple of the Sasquatch, that these guys are timbermen. They're foresters. The guys I'm talking about, these tribal members, are foresters. And they were up there doing their regular work, and they saw 2 of them. Well, they'd already seen the tracks, and then they were kind of doing their job and semi-following the tracks, and they saw 2 adults, large adults, at about 300 yards away, which, they didn't try to take pictures or anything. I don't think they had cameras because they were there working, and I don't know what kind of equipment that they take with them while they're working. They might have had cameras. I didn't ask them. But they talked about how everything went, and of course they don't stay. They don't stay long for people to observe them or take pictures or anything else, because they're on the move pretty quickly, and they were on the move when the two the two Native Americans saw them. They were on the move, so they were moving away quite rapidly. And but they noticed, and one of them they said was a big male. The other one they couldn't identify because it kind of kept its back to them most of the time.
So they have.
So yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say. So they have a pretty peaceful coexistence.
Yes, they do. Yes, very much so, because nobody up on the tribal land bothers them much. A few years ago, one tribal member shot one, and he was, oh man, he had all kinds of bad luck, and the elders in the tribe really kind of got after him big time, because they said, these have been around forever up here, and we just let them be, and they're not going to hurt anything. They are our big brothers, and so, they don't want anybody shooting at them or anybody, or they don't want anybody taking pictures or anything. And some of the elders do, and I'm talking about Native Americans at my age or older, and a lot of them are up in their hundreds, early hundreds, and they're getting pretty feeble, but they still have got a lot of say in the tribal councils and stuff that they have here.
There's a writer, a former lawman by the name of David Paulides. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, very much so.
And his Missing 411 and his Tribal Bigfoot and his Hoopa Project books. A lot of people, he doesn't, but a lot of people tend to believe that sometimes these missing people in national parks might be the result of a rogue Sasquatch or something like that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't have no personal thoughts on it, but I've heard about it for quite a few years. And up around Mount St. Helens, before it blew, there was lots of activity up there. And it seemed to be, I don't know this personally, but I was told that there had been people, skiers up there had disappeared, and they never was ever found, or never even traces of them were found. And just in the last few years, up at a place called Wenatchee Lake, and the Wenatchee place in the northern part of our state, about 120 miles from where I live here, a place called Wenatchee, and there's a Wenatchee Lake there. Well, an elderly lady, not elderly compared to me, but I think in her 70s or maybe early or late 70s or early 70s, was going to pick huckleberries up there. And she left from a trailhead and was never seen after that, ever. And so there was searches out for her continuously. And one of the field researchers that does a lot of Bigfoot field research up in there, by the name of Paul Graves, he spent a lot of hours up there trying to get evidence or find something that caused her disappearance. And no one is, the deputy sheriffs or DNR or any of them has never been able to locate any evidence of her bones or, well, they did find the bucket that she was going to pick huckleberries in. They found that. But no evidence that the bucket was beat up or bent or anything like that. So no one really knows, and that's the one that has been closest to me. The rest of them were stories that I'd heard about Mount St. Helens and the areas where some people disappeared.
Bob, if you had to guess, what do you believe Sasquatch is?
Well, you're right when you say make a guess. I'm as anxious to find out as everybody else is. And if I was going to have any authority to guess at it, I'd say that it's something, a large human-type creature, covered with hair, that does not need fire or anything, lives in the wild out there, and there's enough habitat for them to reproduce, have been for years because they've been around, been talked about for years, and been seen for years. And being as they're so strong and so swift and so very intelligent to be able to survive out there and avoid human beings the best they can, I'd say that they're very smart, and very capable of being able to survive and do what they needed to do. But, Brian, you stop and think about some of our Native Americans when the white folks first come to America, before it was America. The Native Americans didn't have supermarkets to go to. They didn't have rifles to shoot game with or anything. And they survived really nicely. So if you know how to do it and you got that ability, then you can do it. Of course, we couldn't anymore. I always thought I could because I lived off the land when I made that trip up in 1978. Most of the way I lived off the land. So consequently, if you put yourself out there to survive, and I did, but I lost quite a little bit of weight, by doing it, but I was still strong enough to put the packs on the horses and the saddles on. So I'd say that they're some type of I don't really want to call them creatures. I don't really know what to call them. I call them beings. And I think that probably they're fairly close to us somehow, closer than a chimpanzee or the orangutan. And, they're not too far down from us. And, as the DNA goes. And so until we learn more about these and become more familiar with them, instead of shooting at them and scaring them, or even, I think if we don't have that much fear for them and we try to communicate with them, I think we'll learn a lot. I hope that happens before I'm gone. So, Brian, I really don't know how to put a handle on what they really are. They really are something we don't understand yet, but they're there, and apparently they've been here for a long time.
You might have already kind of answered my next question that I want to ask you. Now, it's been 50 years since your remarkable footage that was shot by you and Roger. And with all the advances in technology, everybody pretty much has a computer or a camera in their front pocket. I'm just wondering, why do you think no one else has gotten such complete footage like you guys?
Well, okay, Brian, I'm going to go out on a limb right here now for you.
All right.
And I haven't told hardly anybody how I feel about that, but by talking to some people up here that say they communicate with them and stuff, I haven't had that opportunity to do that. I feel that was a planned thing by the Sasquatch for Roger and I to be able to do that, to try and get some attention about them instead of the fear and destroy them, and try and figure out a way, if it exposes enough people. I'm kind of talking to my head right now, but anyway, that's kind of what my take is on that, why we were able to get that. I think the Sasquatch themselves made that decision.
Interesting. I've watched it hundreds of times, that footage that you shot, and I can't help but think that maybe that Sasquatch, they call her Patty, I can't help but think that she was probably watching you and maybe even following you guys as much as you guys were looking for her.
Yep, I think you're accurate on that. Pretty accurate, Brian. And so she said, I'll just step out there, and they are so intelligent, so intelligent. that maybe if old Roger and Bob have a film to show the world, that'll explain that we really are here on this planet Earth, and when people see us, don't shoot at us like a bear or a wild animal out there. And sometimes I neglect to say things like that because I don't know that. See, I don't have any kind of proof of any way. But, me just being an old cowboy that rides in the mountains a lot, that's kind of my take on what probably happened.
You mentioned you're an old cowboy, so you're 86 years old. We don't know how long these creatures, what their longevity is. Do you think Patty could still be out there wandering around or, hunting or living out there in Bluff Creek?
Well, let me say this, Brian. It was told to me by a field researcher that claims he has connections with them. And he got a picture of one, or they saw one, and then had somebody do a picture that does that type of work, Him and a group of people saw one, and then he communicated with them and claims that the picture of the one that he saw in the road was Patty's son, and that she is still alive at very, very old age, of course. So that was told to me by a guy that tells me that he communicates with them.
So maybe, if Patty had a son and she's still wandering out there, I mean, she must at one point had a mate.
I'm sure, yeah. So maybe that other footprint, there was the mate, and maybe that other one, the youth, was their offspring.
Incredible.
See, those maybes are just maybes, are thoughts that we think that could happen.
As you look back over your life, and you saw this being, as you refer to.
Yes, being.
As you look back, you were 36. Now I'm 43, and I think back, 10, 20 years ago. And I know now at 43, I didn't know anything at 23, or I know a little bit more at 33, and now 43, I'm starting to get a handle on things. Now, as you look back on your on what happened to you 50 years ago, the old saying is, hindsight is 20/20. Is there anything that you wish you would have done differently then, or from the beginning of your search or the end? Or I know you kind of shied away from the public spotlight, for a long time, and then Roger Patterson passed away. Do you think you would have changed anything about what happened on October 20th, 1967?
Well, Brian, yes, I do. If Roger would have lived longer, I think there would have been certain changes around. And so the first 35 years after that film footage, I had a terrible life around being ridiculed and talked about, and it wasn't easy for me. So then in 2003, the Russian scientists had contacted me and wanted me to come to Russia in the late 90s. And I couldn't because I was working all the time on a steady job, of course. And so Dmitry Banov, one of the main Russian scientists, said, well, if Bob won't come to Russia, I'll go to the United States and have some time with him. So that happened. 2003, because they were having a conference in Bluff Creek, California. And so I went down with a man named John Green and Chris Murphy and Tom Steenberg and Dmitry Banov, the Russian scientist. And so when I went to that conference, I didn't know what to expect. And there wasn't a lot of people there. There was probably around 200 or 300 people there. And when I walked in the room, everybody in the room stood up and applauded me. And I thought, oh, my God, this is so incredibly different than up in the Washington area where they're from Stelby all the time. I said, So that's when I started going to conferences again and meeting people and talking to people about that. 2003 was when that changed my whole life. And before that, John Green said to me one time, sitting in my living room, "Bob, would you do it again if you had an opportunity?" And I said, "Not on your life. I would not go through that ever again." And see, by then Roger was dead. And so I was the only one, and I said, "No way." Well, then in 2003, it changed my life. And since then, I've been going to a lot of conferences and meeting a lot of people that I've had experiences with them. Some either sightings or evidence that they were there nearby, and that sort of thing. So now then, that's what I do. I'll be heading to the conference there in Hastings in another week or so of Harris, where Harris put that one on in Hastings, Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I'm anxious to get there because I met Harriet and some of the women that worked with her down there before coming to the conferences. All great people, just wonderful people. And so, yes, I'm excited to get down there to Hastings and be on Harriet's speaking part, or even if I don't speak, if she doesn't want me to speak, just to be there and listen to some of the field researchers and people that had evidence come there. That's why I like to go and meet people, is to hear what they have, what they've had, what happened to them, and how it happened, and all the details. I don't have time to listen to everybody, but I have. Whenever I do, I take as much time as I possibly can.
Bob, over your years, as you kind of reflect back and you think about things, you're an experienced outdoorsman before you encountered the being. After you had this encounter, when you're alone, in your solitude and you're looking out over nature, did this encounter change anything about how you see the world of nature? Or I don't know if you're a religious person or a spiritual person, but like the world God created, did it change the way you fundamentally think about, our place in the world?
Oh, definitely, Brian. Yes. I'd say lots of yeses to that.
Mm-hmm.
I am a religious person, and I am semi-spiritual also. So, yes, and of course, I always appreciated God's creation, and even more so when I learned about that these people talk to me about the trees and how the Sasquatch talk to them about the trees in the forest and so forth. So, that gives me so much more respect for everything out there, every rock I see, every being that God put on this earth, I have a respect for. I don't hunt. I used to hunt for game because I used it and I ate it and loved it. I don't even hunt for game anymore. I don't want to kill anything. I might kill mosquitoes or flies, but other than that, I don't want this. I think God just put flies and mosquitoes here to give us more reflexes to see how fast we can hit them, And so, yes, it changed my whole life, and that trip that I made up in 1978, and I didn't even know about Sasquatch then. Changed my life a tremendous amount, It's just, so I have so much love for human beings and everything out there. People say, "Well, you're so friendly." Well, yeah, I'm friendly because why shouldn't I be? I'm 86 years old and I'm in fairly decent health for all the injuries I've had. And so I thank God every day for what I have. I've been a very blessed man, and therefore I've got a lot to be thankful for. a powerful lot. I got a wonderful wife that takes care of me here, and doesn't get after me too often unless I get kind of out of hand, and then she straightens me right out. But and I have great friends all around me, and unfortunately, some of them are not real healthy and things like that. But I'm just so grateful for everything. I'm just grateful, Brian, to be able to speak to you, and hope that someday I can meet you. Those things to me mean an awful lot. I think that's what God wanted us to do, is to be friendly with everybody. This whole thing of what goes on a lot is just unnecessary.
Yeah, there's too much hate and discontent for this short lifetime that we have.
Absolutely, that's what I keep saying.
Bob, what a perfect way to tie up our conversation. Before I let you go and let you get on with the rest of your busy day, I wanted to point out our listeners to your website. It's www.bobgimlin.net. And it's a really nice, well put together website. Could you tell us a little bit? I see you have a DVD for sale, Bob Gimlin Beyond Bigfoot. What's that about?
Yes. Yeah, that's a pretty nice DVD. The guy that works with me, named Russell Accord, did that, worked on that, got it going, and another guy named Gary that works on some of that stuff for me, and they did a good job on that, and it's just a small segment of part of my life, because I've been a very adventurous man all of my life, and I didn't sit around much. There is no moss on my body because I keep moving, and I for my age, I still do a lot. I do harnessing, driving with the horses and buggies and wagons, and belong to things, and I have groups of people come to take lessons from harnessing and driving carriages, and we do wine rides and different things with a group right here in 10 miles from where I live, called Union Gap Agriculture Museum. And so I stay very busy, I stay doing something all the time. And the weather's been really good up here, Brian, this winter, so I've been able to do a lot. We didn't have a lot of snow like last year, and I try to do a lot with the youth. And so 2 weeks ago, we thought we was going to have snow. So we put runners on all of the wagons and equipment, thinking we'd have snow to give the youth rides. Last year we had 500 kids come with sleigh rides, all free. Hot chocolate, hot apple cider, donuts, rolls, and whatever, And so anyway, this year we planned it again, and of course we didn't have snow, so we put the wheels back on the wagons, and we didn't have quite as many youth and adults come this year, but we still had 400 come 2 weeks ago on Saturday, and we didn't work long hours like we did last year. We had 500 last year, 400 this year. And last year we had to shut it down because the horses were getting so tired in that deep snow. This year, there was no snow, so the horses held up good. We didn't go near as many hours as we did last year. So next year we'll plan it again to kind of see what we're going to do for. We do quite a few things with the youth down there.
Well, that's great. And I'm looking through your website right now. You've got different conferences, you've got different conventions. You're going to be in Nebraska, you're in Ohio, you're in Washington, you're in Kentucky coming up this year, in Texas. So you're right, 86 years old, you're not gathering any moss.
Brian, thank you. That is very true. I keep moving all the time. In fact, my wife told me just a little bit ago, you have to be back because you're going to get a call at 12 o'clock. Well, I got back about 11,
yeah.
And then a guy called me about Bigfoot, and I had to get him off the phone to get your call.
Yeah, you did.
So, yeah, but this guy, I know him quite well, and he told me some stories, really, really exciting stories. And then he said that he'd introduced me to a guy that just lived down the road, had some quite a few encounters on their hunting trips into the mountains up here. At the same area where I was talking about, Bumping Lake and Lily Lake and different places where I ride the horses, So I'm going to go visit with them two guys here. Not today, but I got a lot of other stuff today to do. I got tractor work to do today.
I bet you. Well, God bless you, young feller.
Thank you, Brian. Hey, thank you so much. Hey, you guys. Hey, how is the weather back there in Nebraska?
Well, I'll tell you what. Right now, I'm looking at my outdoor thermometer. It's 43 degrees out there, outside. So it's going to be hovering around the 20s, 30s for a while. We just had a big kind of a blizzard, but it's all melted. And now it got cold, and now it's kind of being moderate right now. So it's doable. The kids are outside playing for recess, so it ain't too bad.
Oh, good. Well, I'll just bring an extra heavy shirt and take some. Well, how far, Brian, are you from Hastings?
A few hours. Now, that weekend, our show, I'm actually committed to doing, we're having a paranormal convention in Omaha, and we are hosting that, and the BFRO is going to be there, and so we're committed for that. So I will not be able to attend the Bigfoot conference in Hastings, but I'll certainly make my way out to meet you at some convention along the way soon.
Well, if you get a chance, I and Russell are putting one on a city called Kennewick, Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, I'll check into them. That.
If you get up this way, well, just give us a holler and come on over, and we'd be really happy to have you come.
Well, I'd love it, and let me tell you, the show's been in existence for about 8 years. I've been on it for 4, and I can honestly tell you that I've enjoyed this conversation with you more than any other that I've had on this program. You've been a real gentleman, and I've really enjoyed sitting back and listening to you, your wealth of information, your history, your perspective on life and on the world, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Bob. And I hope you have a great year.
Thank you, Brian, and I'm sure planning on it, but, we can't have any real guarantees, I mean, if I'm losing a really close buddy just across the street, younger than me, from cancer, and so 2 months ago I'd have said, no, that man will live forever, and all at once he had pancreatic cancer, and he's been diagnosed to have no more than 2 months, and he's been home now a week, and of course I go see him every day and talk to him. Just a great guy, but God must have a reason for this, or it wouldn't happen. And he must have had a reason to save me for something. I don't know what it is, but I sure hope that he shows me someday so I can get it done before that happens to me, you see.
Well, Bob, we're all on a journey, and I'm glad that on this journey we are able to, our roads intersected and crossed here. So I just want to thank you again for being on the show, and I'm going to close out the show now, but if you can hold on after I close it out, and I'd just like to talk to you for just a couple seconds after I close it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, thank you for having me on, Brian, and I'll be right here.
Absolutely. My guest was Bob Gimlin. Yes, that Bob Gimlin. You can check out everything about him on bobgimlin.net, and I really enjoyed that conversation. And on behalf of our co-hosts Wayne, Lori, Zip, and Doug, this is Brian. Everybody, thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Necronomicast, a podcast hosted by a bunch of blood bags and produced by Brian Corey and Wayne Brecky. For show notes and other interesting information, go to the show page at necronomicast.com. And until next time, find something better to do with your time.